you guys could give me a mic check.
Check, check. Watermelon, bumblebees, check.
Check. Cantaloupe. Broccoli face.
Check. Bees, check.
Words. Check.
Sounds.
Cantaloupe. Broccoli face. Expression.
Heh, I unmuted and I hear broccoli face.
Feelings.
And go back to this screen. Alright, welcome to Threats from Gallifrey. I'm Garrett, and we have Rob and Tony with us. And we're going to talk about an interesting situation. How do you keep a party together? I mean, I've played in a Dresden Files game where I played a reporter who didn't know that he was Red Court vampire infected. My wife played a 7-year-old Girl Scout who was finding out that she's half gargoyle. I mean, what keeps these people working together toward the same common goals that the games are built around?
Rob.
So an easy one is that if they have absolutely no one else that they can turn to help them, and they have to turn to the other PCs, then they really have no other choice. Prime example, we are playing a Hunter the Vigil game in World of Darkness. As a hunter in World of Darkness, everyone else in the world thinks you're crazy if you start talking about killing vampires and werewolves and witches. So honestly, when the other people around you are the only ones who know you're not crazy and are the only ones willing to go out on a hunt with you at night, you don't really have much of a choice for who your friends are. So that's a good start is make sure that the party needs one another for something if you can. It may be as simple as no one else knows what they're doing or will believe in them, so they have to rely on the other party members. But it could be other reasons as well. But that's the one that first comes to the forethought of my mind. If you're more D&D kind of focused or a fantasy style game, it's really easy to keep people together if they all have kind of the same boss or overarching person in charge of them. So like my first thought is if you're working for a king or a count or a duke or you're all hired by the same guy, at least in the short term, that's a real easy way to keep people together. I mean, you're doing your job. You don't have much choice who you work with, especially at like the start of a campaign. And then hopefully after the first few missions or quests or sessions, um, you can start to crop up new problems that the characters share together, where they will just want to work with one another, or just naturally will work with one another.
Yeah, kind of hopping on that with the whole D&D thing. It's kind of a trope, I think, with D&D, where, oh, you're all hired by so-and-so and you meet in the castle or whatnot. But there is actually something to be said for role-playing elements within that, too, where maybe you don't necessarily like the person who's your coworker, but you have to work with them anyways. So that can give you a lot of fodder for some things. But yeah, I agree with both Rob's points. Another thing that I would say is if your characters share a common problem where maybe the main bad guy has interfered or messed up each character's life in some way that doesn't necessarily have to do with a separate character in the party, but they're both tied to that one bad guy or BBEG or whatever. It instantly gives them some kind of connection, even if they might not have any other common ground. They both want to get to the bad guy, and that's how they can start to connect.
You can kind of do it the other way too. Again, World of Darkness, of course. Me and Tony were in a very short campaign that Josh ran, and I played his brother-in-law in the game. I was married to
Yes.
his sister, and my character was this like nerdy, refined, smart, college-educated, like doctor scientist, and Tony's character was a blue collar, working carpentry, working with his hands, Austinite, just salt of the earth type dude, and we had absolutely nothing in common other than we both loved the same woman, as him as his sister and me as my wife. And she was like, "Oh, hang out with Mick, my brother, and you guys should hang out." And her kind of pushing us to hang out together, and then getting involved in craziness. And so that can work too, where if multiple PCs have the same like NPC in common, that they care about, whether they're kidnapped or they just force the PCs together in a certain way. That's another way to do it.
Yeah,
Or antagonist.
it's interesting you say that, because from my perspective in that game, I was like, ugh, I don't want to hang out with Rob's character, but I love my sister, so I'm going to do it. And also then it became like this thing where I had to preserve my macho-ness a little bit, where I had to kind of show him up a little bit, or also when we started getting into some trouble, be like, well, I got to take care of him because he has to get home to my sister, because otherwise she'll be upset and stuff. And even though the whole time, in character, I'm like, I don't know if I want to be hanging around this guy, I still had those outside motivations prompting me to cooperate and work together and progress the story as a team.
You go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna switch it over to another World of Darkness that Josh ran for us, kind of going with that same boss scenario, where Rob was playing a guy who worked for the Chiron Group, and he had been there for years and years, and my character came in as an undercover police officer to try and investigate what was going on, because tax fraud, not monsters. And I was partnered with Rob's character, and again, complete opposites. Jordan, Rob's character, was a drug fiend, an alcoholic, and bitter and mean at the time, at least a little still is. And my guy was, crew cut, by the book, police officer, do-gooder guy. And it was sort of like a buddy cop kind of adventure in some ways, where instead of going after the thugs, we were going after the monsters. But Jordan would be like, "Oh, you got to do this, and you take a load off and have some cocaine and booze and hookers and stuff." And I was like, "No, I must sit and do the paperwork." And then Jordan would come over and rip my pencil out of my hand and throw it into the ceiling and stuff. And we didn't necessarily like or get along with each other at first, but over the course of those adventures, we definitely became very close friends. And then also that made it much harder when at the end of the campaign it came out that I was undercover and the whole shtick was blown, and I had to shoot Jordan several times in the chest.
and you shot me to death.
Yes, I did. But that was definitely a short. I think it was only 5 sessions, right? But we definitely had a little arc of just like, oh, I don't know, at the beginning. But because we had a shared job, we literally shared the cube. It progressed into cooperation and friendship and whatnot. So yeah, it's kind of 2 examples right there of different ways that can kind of achieve that goal.
I also think it's highly unlikely as a GM that like your entire party is not gonna want to work with one another. Like at the very least, one player is gonna be all gung ho on the story and is totally gonna like follow down whatever path you just loosely lay in front of them. At least one person is gonna be on board to ride the story. Usually it's I found like 2 characters kind of will rub up against one another in a party. And when it comes to that, you just kind of have to. You can kind of tackle it 2 ways, I guess. But if it's an actual conflict, you talk to the like players themselves and figure it out. But if it's in story, like there's always a way you can get them to work together. I mean, one person might know something the other character needs, or they're hiding something. There are ways to get around that. I mean, if you dangle enough cheese in front of them, they're gonna come calling eventually.
I mean, we've had a myriad of examples. I'm thinking just across World of Darkness. In our vampire campaign, Josh and I, our characters were in many ways very separate from each other throughout the campaign. There's definitely a Lorenzo story and a Lucas story, but we shared a house for a very long time. we had enough interaction or crossed paths with NPCs that we were always in and out of each other's stories. And while it wasn't always 100% like right on the nose of like, yes, this is my best friend and we are going forth on the adventure, we were definitely still very invested with each other, to kind of progress in that same vein and help each other out when needed, even when we had, some very serious in character, discrepancies with each other. And on kind of the flip side of that, in our werewolf campaign, that game is all about togetherness and family and whatnot. And we all were part of a pack, and even to this day, some of the characters in the pack don't necessarily see eye to eye. But yes, but at the end of the day, no matter what, over the course of that campaign, we discovered that the pack is family, the pack is life, the pack is bond. And no matter how much you might be mad at so and so in the pack, you drop everything to help that guy when they need it. And just by the nature of like the pack being a wolf pack in all respects, made that sort of happen. We were all part of it, even though some characters didn't want to be or were less involved or whatever. Being part of that shared experience was something that brought the characters together, even just from that small thread into something big.
So just by the natural plot of that element, or was there something that the GM specifically did to show you that the necessity of the pack working together?
Well, werewolf is sort of that insular thing in itself. Like, it's kind of like Hunter in that respect. Like, you're a bunch of werewolves, and only another werewolf really knows what it's like to be a werewolf. Um, and you're surrounded by like all these other monsters that you don't know and may kill you and can't quite trust. And when you like look into that darkness of uncertainty and these unknowns, you kind of start looking around the werewolves around you that yes, you may not like or you have problems with, but like you know them, they are on your side, and that sort of lends itself to, well, do I take the unknown or do I go with what I have? And no, like it's almost that like safety net you don't want to kind of leave it. Um, but I mean, more than that, in the campaign, there was a big bad guy going around. They were like murdering people, family members of the pack, people in the city, and there's a lot of antagonists in the campaign, I guess. And I guess I'm going on a roundabout way of saying that the politicians stop arguing when the barbarians are at the gates. So a big antagonist or several antagonists really will make a party circle its wagons. Like, oh boy, Richard and Gav, they don't really like each other, but, when the fucking pure are at the door ready to rip your throat out, yeah, Gav's okay. He has a giant sword. He's going to swing at my enemies while I tear them apart. Like, yeah, he's my bro. Like, I know he's on my side at least compared to all these other crazy horrors of the night. So
it's funny because Rob says that, and Gav is Lauren, my wife's character, and Richard is my character. We don't necessarily see eye to eye, but at the same time, I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, Gav is my bro. I would die for him and stuff because he's my pack member and stuff. But kind of going back to the whole what sort of happened, and in some ways, you also see what you can achieve together as a party. So you can definitely do more together than you can apart. And if you're in, a couple encounters pretty quickly, that should become apparent when, I'm a barbarian and I'm able to, draw the fire because everyone's attacking me. I got a whole bunch of hit points and a big scary axe, and then the rogue comes in and is able to sneak attack because the guy's distracted and stuff. It's things like that where the ranger is starting to fire shots before they even get close, and the sorcerer is using magic to mess things up before I get in there with my giant axe. Well, we've just completely decimated an encounter because we work together. One barbarian is not the same equal as a barbarian and a rogue and a wizard and a ranger and all that stuff. There's definitely elements that you can achieve together that you can't apart, and it should become pretty apparent.
That's a very good point. A lot of game systems, even mechanically, like even if role playing wise you're not into it or out of character or whatever, mechanically speaking, you probably have a better chance at survival and success together. Fate Dresden Files is perfect for that. I mean, even your characters that aren't supernatural or don't have the tools to deal with some monsters can give I want to say advantage because of D&D can give you like bonuses, those pluses that you can, other characters can mark off to get pluses on their attacks. That's a great example where like the other characters who maybe don't have as much to do or whatnot can help a singular character attack a bigger threat, and even mechanically, it sort of makes sense to stay together with your party.
I'm going to touch on werewolf one more time, because most of the party characters and a couple NPC characters that filled out the pack bought into the idea of being in the pack pretty well. Except for my character. I literally did not want to be anywhere near it. In character, I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be associated with you people. I'm better than you for a whole mess of reasons. But I literally didn't want to be part of it. Didn't want to work with them whatsoever. But it came to a point a few sessions in where I literally had nowhere else to go. My parents who I were living with at the time in game had, kicked me out of the house, and I had been thrown, or no, my apartment had been ransacked, and I'd been thrown out of because of werewolf territory stuff. And then I wanted to come home, and my parents were like, well, that wouldn't look good because we were so upper crusty. And I was kicked out of school, and I was sleeping in the car, and I had nothing. And I remembered that, a couple sessions before, this werewolf lady had come up and been like, hey, I want to help you. Here's where you can find me. Just come find me. I'll help you out. And at that point, at rock bottom, I literally had nowhere else to turn. And I went and got accepted into the pack, and I still fought it for a long, long time.
Much of the campaign.
Yes, but eventually through the sacrifices and the experiences of being with the party, it made me buy into the whole thing as strong as any other member of the pack at this point.
I think that's a good point where the biggest problem with like the party not wanting to work together or not stay together is probably going to be at the beginning of a campaign, maybe into the early middle. After a while, like, you're either just going to form a band of brothers feelings with the other PCs through like the horrible things you've gone through or just the trials you've gone through. That I mean, you're just gonna, maybe they're not your friend, but they're your brothers in arms. I mean, horror is a great example. If you put a group of people through something horrendous together, it's hard to not have a connection to those people. It's like war, right? That's why soldiers are so close to their brothers in arms, these people who have gone through horrendous experiences together. Role-playing is often that same stuff. Like, D&D is often high fantasy and swords and axes and all that, but I mean, there are some horrible things that a D&D party goes through. War, violence, death, blood. I mean, World of Darkness is a game about horror and terror and violence. Once you kind of focus them in the early game, eventually it's, they're just going to take for granted that the party is their friends, they can rely on them, and they're going to stay together because, yeah, maybe you can't trust this shady NPC that just showed up who's trying to talk nice to us, but I know I can trust, Tony and Josh and Lauren, who are, the players of their characters. I know that I can trust them at my back.
Yeah. It's kind of bringing it back to Hunter. We're sort of at that point a little bit where, like, my character, I don't necessarily particularly super care for Josh or Lauren's character, overly so. I mean, they're definitely my comrades and stuff at this point. I'm not like, hey, we should go out to a ball game or whatever with either of them, but I know that, I've got their back because they've got mine at this point in the campaign. They're part of the cell that deserves enough from me to look out for them, and they to look out for me, I hope. And it's kind of, I think Hunter is a very prime example of what you were just talking about, that brothers in arms feel, because that's literally what you're doing. We've lost, half a dozen NPCs already from the cell, and it's not going to stop at any point soon. And I look, you look around the room in character, you're like, oh well, the only people who are still here are Lauren's character, Josh's character, and well, God, we better stick together because things are out there.
The 4 of you from the original cell, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Remake.
Out of like 10.
Yeah, it was up. Yeah.
And I think just for the sake of showing how you can get characters to work together, we should probably we've had just so many different examples from World of Darkness. In our mage campaign, my character was brought into the whole mage world, and I needed someone to basically look after me. So I got thrown at Josh's character, and they said, "Teach this young idiot kid," and that's how we got to work together. And I was just like, I'm gonna slack off in class, whatever. And Josh is trying to teach me all about magic, and taking me with him on mage business. And then on the flip side of that, people in the mage community didn't trust my character, so they assigned Lauren's character to watch me and follow me. So now, yes,
He was spying on you for a good while.
yes. So now we're all tied together in different ways, but we're all tied together, and we always end up in the same place or doing similar activities because of all these reasons. So that's a way to have us connected in very different ways. In Changeling, kind of a different way. My character was basically the fairy cops. In essence, I was sergeant in the Changeling police squad in the city. So whenever anyone got into a problem, who'd they call? They called me. So Josh's character had just come into the city. He was brand new to the whole Changeling thing, and you got to take him under your wing to show him the ropes. So we're connected there. Lauren's character is just always running afoul of issues because reasons and stuff. So when there's a problem, who do you call? Oh, we got to call Ray. We got to get him down here to help us out. And so my character, by nature of my job, is going all around the city, getting involved in all sorts of stuff because I have to. I'm a cop and everything. And now I'm dragging around Josh with me. And, half the time Lauren's involved with it, or just because of the, where things are happening, we're all involved and together and stuff. So we've just had a lot of different ways that we've been brought together as characters and stuff. And yet it all moves towards that working together thing at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and place for the character who's really working for the bad guy, everyone and stuff like that. That can be fun on occasion with planning. Hell, it can be fun when everyone at the table actually knows that someone's crooked, like behind the scenes, but the characters don't know. Like that can be really interesting. The whole Hunter campaign, Lauren has been lying her fucking ass off.
Oh my god, it's terrible.
But like Tony and Josh know that she's lying to them, but like their characters don't know that. So that's been a great bit of fun too. Like she'll make rolls and she's just the best of liars, and they just can't outroll her on it. And like they know she's lying, but the characters have no idea. They think he's totally upfront. So like that can be fun too, and you still get people to work together in sort of a two-faced sort of way.
Yeah. Kind of smacking back towards Tim and Jordan there too, where we all knew I was undercover cop guy.
We also knew it was going to end with one of us killing the other one.
Yes, we went in knowing that, but we didn't know who was going to win that fight, and it kind of made that road more interesting. It made that road very interesting to walk down too.
You know what? Sometimes it's okay if the party's not together. I less so for big groups, but when you have like 2 or 3 players, it's okay to have people split for like sessions or
campaigns
if you're free. We talk about it a lot. I mean, our Game of Thrones campaign was probably 80% the party split. Like it was just Tony and Josh playing. But for a good 80% of that campaign, they were not together. They were on different continents. They had an ocean separating them.
And the story was unified between them?
Yeah, well, eventually the stories came to a head and came back together at the end, which is, very Game of Thronesy. But yeah, like Tony was about the war in Westeros and winning his kinghood and like kind of taking control of Westeros and saving it from these warring factions. Whereas Josh was more about he was with Daenerys and Essos and like their travels and her returning to Westeros and like that side of the Game of Thrones kind of story. It's an alternate universe from the books. Um, and then obviously at the end they kind of come back together to fight the final battle against the White Walkers at the wall and whatnot. And
Yeah,
yeah, it was a very interesting
it was a
campaign.
hell of a thing too, because we got to that one point with Josh's character where he literally had a choice where he could go over and have that whole apart from me campaign in Essos with Danny and all that stuff, or he could have stayed and perhaps gotten rescued or whatever. It's may still have been quite separate and stuff, but
Yeah, because I kind of gave him like three choices. I was like,
yeah,
he had like a chance to flee the city, but Cersei was like, "Oh, I'm gonna send assassins to murder your fucking friends. I'm gonna do anything I can to slaughter them. If you do that." And then like another option was like, "Well, maybe you stay in the city and like you're gonna be Cersei's bitch and you're gonna have to like help her beat your friend in the war and stuff." Or basically him banished from Westeros, leave, and that's what he ultimately chose. Where he's like, I'm gonna protect, Tony's character. I'm gonna protect his Josh was a maester, so he's like, I'm gonna protect the family that I'm sworn to. I'm gonna keep them safe. I'm gonna leave the country, and that's what's best for everyone. And whatever happens to me, and that's fine. Basically, and he obviously ended up embroiled in a huge part of the campaign that we wouldn't have seen otherwise, and it just worked out very well for that campaign.
yeah, and kind of even jumping back into World of Darkness again, like with vampires, I was saying earlier, we definitely had those very separate storylines, and there were a lot of times where I did my own thing and Josh's character was doing his own thing. um but I think particularly for Worlds of Darkness, it was all about the city and stuff. And we were both working together in the city to perhaps better it or serve our own goals. But we had a shared, at the very least, a shared geography to tie ourselves together, and it gave that feeling of togetherness, even though we weren't necessarily always right in the same room together.
In your Dresden Files game, what was the uniting factors?
That's actually a very interesting case.
Uh,
Because go
yeah.
ahead, Rob.
Well, so my character was a female wizard, who screwed up with summoning something bad, and her husband ended up getting killed by it. Her husband was a former Marine who served in one of the wars in Iraq with Josh's character. And so, time passed. My character's husband's dead, and Josh's character is homeless. He's living on the streets of Buffalo because that's where we said it. We said it here in Buffalo for Dresden Files, and it just sort of through everything. I kind of found out who he was, and I wanted to help him because he was my husband's friend in the game, and he kind of wanted to help because that's his friend's, wife. And so that's kind of initially why we started helping one another. And then, eventually, Connie and Desmond end up, falling in love, and they have this huge relationship. And I mean, by halfway through that campaign, Connie would like die for Desmond, and it started out very, very simply and kind of just snowballed itself into a relationship between the two of them. I didn't know if I could trust anyone else in that game, but I know Josh had my back.
Yeah, the first session, one of Josh's character, his friends, a homeless guy, had gotten murdered by evil mage dude, and they thought that maybe Josh's character had done it, and he was obviously very invested because it was his friend who had died and everything. So Connie, being the wizard and having to check out this stuff because it's wizard stuff, um, kind of found him and obviously had to be involved because wizard stuff. And Josh's character wanted to be involved because friend dying stuff, and that kind of just pitted them together for that adventure. And I don't remember, was it at the end of the first session where you were just like, hey, maybe you can like stay with me because I feel bad and
So,
stuff.
so like, I was like, well, eventually I might have Josh's character like stay with me or find him somewhere to stay. But I was like, probably not the first session. That seems ridiculous. And we had ended up at what was it,
The Inkwell.
the Inkwell. I took him to our like picnic poetry wizard kind of hangout. Because we were hunting this guy, and Josh's character had like kind of a PTSD
Yes.
meltdown. But like he didn't like freak out and start like breaking stuff or like any like not like the typical shell shock PTSD reaction. He just sort of like got quiet and like started weeping and like it sort of like broke my heart because of how realistic it was and how much like Josh's character was hurt. And I don't know, just in character, I was like, there's no way I would let, her. I mean, Connie loved her husband. She's like, there's no way I'm gonna let like his good friends who was at war with him on the streets. Just no way in hell that's gonna happen. Like she's not the person who would let that go. And he moved in, started helping him get a job. Him, trying to help out around the house, and I mean, eventually Connie got Desmond back on his feet, and when he was ready to leave, she's like, "Why are you leaving? Don't leave and stuff. You live here." And yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, a very natural progression amidst all the wizardry.
Yeah, he, there's this, for a long time, Desmond was like a total normie, and so there's a lot of like, her trying to protect him or thinking she needs to, but him like protecting himself because he was a soldier. And eventually he ended up getting some cool Dresden Filesy stuff himself, and I mean they're an incredible team, just mechanically speaking and relationship wise. I mean, Connie and Desmond have probably one of the strongest relationships out of many of our game's characters. I mean, we have some deep relationships, but they were a very tight-knit bond by the end of that campaign.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Desmond literally died for her and then came back.
And how did that handle?
It involved Denarians.
Yes. It involved a long scheme by me where I was just like, hey, Josh, you want to get Rob good for all those Game of Thrones deaths he did to us? And Josh was like, yeah, what do you think? And I was like, well, what do you think about like Desmond dying? I'm like, don't worry, you'll come back and stuff, but I think it'll just totally trip Rob out. And it certainly did. And then I had Josh play a session where he was essentially a ghost wandering around doing stuff and helping from the semi-purgatory afterlife. And at the end of it, I gave him a choice where I was like, you can go and just be dead and pass on and stuff, and you can make another character or whatever, or you can maybe come back and we'll see what happens. And he's like, well, I guess I'll come back. And I basically had the bad guys had found him and had been keeping him alive.
Very similar to the Dresden Files books.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes, but they were Denarians, and they basically said, hey, you can join us, or you can not join us, and we'll torture the hell out of you, and you'll join us anyways. So Josh elected to join them to try and perhaps keep his wits about him, and we played like 2 or 3 sessions with him as a bad guy, for all intents and purposes. Until he was able to find a way to break free, and it was a huge arc that was just some of the most emotional stuff I think we've done in a lot of ways, or at least maintained over several sessions. But yes, that was kind of the short version of that business.
Came back from the dead and stuff, and or like as a ghost. Time had passed and he didn't know it. It was like half a year or a year had passed. So like I got to play little tricks on him where it's like, oh man, yes, Connie's totally in Shitsville right now. Like he comes in, it's like a second passes for him. It's been like a year and everything's totally different in the city. And Connie's working for the bad guys, kind of. And it was interesting. And she goes on thinking he's dead after that, and he ends up winding back up being a Denarian. And that conflict, and you want to help him, and quiet. It was some great.
That's a good example of like the campaign progressing enough to where those two characters cared so much about each other that the progression of the story was because they cared about each other.
Yeah, like the whole point is he was keeping us apart, and we wanted to be back together.
Yes. So there wasn't. I mean, there were bad guys and things happening and everything, but the overall driving thrust of the story was we need to get back together and make this work and all that stuff. And even after he came back and got freed of the Denarians and stuff, he was in a horrible funk. And we had like an entire session where it's like we need to get Desmond back on his feet.
Yeah, he was like not going out and fighting. He was like real depressed and unsure of himself.
Because I made him do bad things.
He did not great things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where the point of staying together is to literally be together. That's a good example of that to kind of tie it back to everything.
All right, so last thoughts, guys. What advice do you give to game masters to keep your playing groups together, no matter how diverse the party?
Give them one unifying goal, whether that's an antagonist, whether it's a NPC that they like, whether it's an item they all want, a bit of knowledge they're all seeking. Give one strong focal point. Probably the simplest way to keep everyone together. Failing that, link several people in different ways. So link, 3 characters together in different ways, and then take whatever characters you have left and link them here in and out with the other characters. So you eventually have kind of a spider web where they sort of have to be where one is at. That's probably the next easiest way to keep everyone together.
Yeah.
And if the group's small enough, don't worry about keeping them together.
Yes, something in common. Whether that it could be that they're as big as being siblings, so we want to be together, or as small as, you're in my class and we're in the shit together, or the bad guy both screwed us up. Something in common. Going back to what Rob said really early, you're just part of the same group. That's the only other person who believes you. As long as you have that one link, that one something, you can find your way forward. And I've said it many times before. The questions 3, the third question, often overlooked, is why is your character working with the party? If you can kind of, especially for more traditional games, D&D stuff, why is your character there? Answer that. You already have something built in. You know why you're there. So if you get into that situation where it's like, do I leave? Do I stay? You kind of have an idea of what you're there for.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for joining me tonight, and I hope this helps game masters with parties that want to wander off into different directions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And